All right, guys and ladies, pay attention. I'm going to show you how to get started with Visual Studio Code, which will be our integrated development environment here in our set of courses, starting from basic web technologies, leading up to, in the end, advanced Android application development. The first course in our course of studies will be basic HTML, basic web page, how web servers work, right? How HTTP works. And to do that, you're going to use an editor, an IDE called Visual Studio Code. Now, I'm guessing by now you've gotten that installed and running. If you haven't, ping me on Slack. But I will show you how to make a simple page, because once you get going with simple, you can always amp it up from there. So the very first thing you're going to want to do is understand that Visual Studio Code wants to be a run everywhere, right? Run the same on Windows, Mac, and Linux. So therefore, it is oriented around the concept of directories. If you don't know what directories are, you're going to need some basic sort of IT skills in terms of the directory system and working with the command prompt. If you need more help getting that up and going, ping me on Slack. I've got tons of tutorials and videos. I can even, have a separate session on that. But basically now we've started up our Visual Studio Code, so we're going to close the welcome screen. And we're going to make a new project, so we're going to say File. And because Visual Studio Code is centered, it goes directly to the metal, right? It goes directly to the file system. So a project is a folder, right? So we're going to say Open Folder, and I'm going to make a new folder. And please, I'm asking you as a personal favor to me, Windows users especially, do not go to your desktop directory. That is very deeply nested, and it has spaces in the path name. That is going to make problems, especially when we get to Node.js. So please go directly to your C drive and make a short directory name directly off the C drive. And Mac people, just go off your home directory. Mac people know what to do. So I'm going to say here on my C drive, new folder. I'm going to give it a very short, hopefully meaningful name so I can find it later. So I'll just go by the date. And that's about it. So just press the Enter key and then say Select Folder. And that's how you make a project, which is just a folder. Now the first thing you're going to want to do here is, well, first of all, it's going to do some startup stuff, so let that get finished. Close out any welcome messages you have. Now you see right here, you're immediately presented with your terminal. And if for some reason you can't find the terminal, just go to View Terminal, and it's right there. So you're going to need to know a handful of basic operating system commands, such as directory. We don't have any files there because we haven't made any yet. So now, first of all, when your first initial setup is going on, you're going to go here to the left sidebar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 items down is your extensions. And you're going to want something which is called Live Server. Why? Because Live Server lets you run a web server directly in your Visual Studio Code to work with your pages. Right, so I'm going to search for Live Server here. Now, I've already got it installed. Actually, Live Share, that's pretty cool as well. In class, I'll be able to share out my screen with you because I just reinstalled my Visual Studio Code, so I need to amp up some of this stuff. But I've got Live Server. You probably don't have it initially, so you're going to go ahead and click on Install. And there's other stuff here too, right? It's free, so go and play around with it. Some HTML helpers and so on. So you can go and install some of these. But anyway, the one that you absolutely need is Live Server. What does that do for you? Thank you for the question. Let's pay attention. Now, one of the big icons I'm going to be using here in Visual Studio Code is my file manager. And I'm going to say File, New File, and by convention, web pages, the first web page in a multi-page site is called index.html. So let's go ahead and say create a new file, and the file type is built into the linting of Visual Studio Code. If you don't know what that means, we'll talk about it. So we're going to now say create new file. And here it's going to open up your operating system explorer. So again, index.html and create file. Now here we are ready to start creating. Now you could use Sublime, by the way. In some of the classes, I'm just going to use Sublime, which is a nice simple text editor to just prove to you that an HTML page is just text. But for the first couple of days, we will show you how to use Visual Studio Code, since we're going to need it for things like JavaScript, CSS, and some of our other adventures later. Now I've uploaded a workbook, and you can go ahead and start taking a look at that to get oriented. But the first thing you need to understand is that as a web page is a document object model, DOM, HTML document object model, and the highest level of containment in that DOM is the root tag, which is the HTML tag. And be careful that you always close any tags you open. So HTML is the root node. It is the largest box of containment in which all of your other HTML nodes are going to fit inside. Now, an HTML page has a head where we put some information to tell the web server what's going on with this page, and it has a body, which is where we put our structural and semantic HTML tags. All of these things are discussed in the lab book I uploaded. So simplest page now could look like this. So you could just put some text. And don't forget to save. You see the one right there. That lets me know that I have one file with unsaved changes. So we'll go ahead and save. Now, how do I view this page? Well, that's where Live Server kicks into effect. So I'm going to right click and say open with Live Server. And it's going to open my default browser, and it's going to show me my content right there. Some of the stuff we're going to be learning is how to view your page source, right? So that shows you what the server sent back to your browser. And another thing we're going to be working with is the Chromium Dev tool. So you can right click and say inspect, and we will talk about the dev tools. We'll be using that in some of our activities to see behind the scenes what's going on. But anyway, if you got this far, then you're doing good, because you're all now set up to go and start creating, working through the workbook that I sent out to you. And then you can go from here and keep building it up, right? You can put things like H tags. I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with this. And you can add things like color. And so on. And don't forget always to close the tags as you open them. Okay, why didn't my color kick in? Haha. Of course, because font is not a sub-attribute of H1, it needs to be there as its own tag. So anyway, I'll leave it to you to go and play around with that. Once you've gotten this far, you can work through my workbook that I kicked out, and you can just keep adding and doing the exercises and ping me on Slack as soon as you run into some questions. Now, head, not tremendously useful these days. In the old days, there was a whole industry set up around Google search engine optimization, and people had all sorts of secret formulas they developed about how to put keywords there and so on. Google doesn't do that anymore. They have a different mechanism of ranking pages. I don't know, you could put a title there, for example. That's kind of good because if you have several pages open, then the title is going to show up in the top tab and you can keep track of them. Aside from that, oh, actually, the head, you could also put links to your CSS and JavaScript libraries, but we will get to that later. So you see up there it says Peter's Grade Page because that was my title. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. Please try and get this done before your first class. Come to class with your Visual Studio Code installed and a little bit of basic knowledge of how to work with the file manager and the terminal and of course your live server. My name is Peter. I'm going to be one of your instructors this term, and as soon as you hit questions, just ping me on Slack and we'll take care of them.